My daughter-in-law threatened me. Either you give us your retirement money, or you're going to a nursing home today. I smiled, picked up my suitcase, and left behind the document that canceled their share of the inheritance. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never thought I'd find freedom through an ultimatum, but that's exactly how it happened. The morning started. Like any other in that house, I was making breakfast, my wrinkled hands carefully flipping pancakes for my grandchildren. The kitchen smelled of butter and maple syrup, a sweet contrast to the tension that perpetually hung in the air whenever Ashley was home. "Hillary, we need to talk," Ashley said, entering the kitchen in her silk robe, hair perfectly styled even at 7 a.m. My daughter-in-law never had a hair out of place, never showed a crack in her perfect facade. I nodded, keeping my eyes on the pancakes. Years of experience had taught me that looking directly at Ashley during these talks only gave her more ammunition. "After you're done with that," she continued, pouring herself coffee into the mug that used to be mine, the one my late husband Frank gave me on our 40th anniversary. When the children had finished eating and ran upstairs to get ready for school, Ashley sat across from me at the kitchen table. My son James had already left for work, or at least that's what Ashley told me. These days, I was never quite sure what was truth and what was manipulation. "James and I have been talking," she began, stirring her coffee absently. "You know how tight things have been financially." I did know. Not because they were actually struggling. James's architectural firm was doing well, but because Ashley had a way of making every penny I owned seem like it rightfully belonged to them. "We think it would make sense if you contributed more to the household," she continued, her voice casual as if discussing the weather. "I already give you half my pension," I reminded her gently. "The pension that Frank had worked 30 years to secure for us." Ashley's smile tightened. "Yes, but that's hardly enough with today's economy. We're providing you with a roof, food, and taking care of you. Taking care of me." I almost laughed. I was the one who cooked, cleaned, and raised their children while they built their careers. At 69, I was still capable and independent, something that seemed to irritate Ashley more each day. "What are you suggesting?" I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. Ashley's eyes narrowed slightly, the mask of concern slipping just enough for me to see the calculation beneath. "All of it, Hillary. We need all of your pension. It's the reasonable thing to do, considering everything we do for you." My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral. "And if I say no?" That's when Ashley's expression changed completely. The facade dropped entirely, revealing the coldness I'd always sensed beneath. "Then I don't think we can continue this arrangement," she said flatly. "There's a nice assisted living facility on Westbrook Avenue. James and I toured it last week. The betrayal stung like a slap. They'd been planning this for some time." "So, those are my options?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Give you my entire income or go to a home?" Ashley leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper though no one else was home to hear. "Let's be honest, Hillary. You're becoming a burden. Either you contribute financially in a meaningful way, or you go to the home today." For a moment, I just stared at her. This woman who had systematically worked to isolate me from my son and take everything I had. But instead of the fear or anger she expected, I felt something else entirely. Relief. I smiled. My smile clearly unsettled her. This wasn't the response she'd anticipated. "You find this amusing?" she asked, her voice sharpening. "No," I said, rising from the table. "I find it clarifying." I walked past her, up to my room, and retrieved the suitcase I'd packed 3 weeks ago after I'd overheard Ashley discussing retirement homes on the phone. I'd been waiting for this moment, preparing for it. When I came back downstairs, Ashley was standing at the bottom of the staircase, arms crossed. What do you think you're doing? Taking the second option, I said calmly. I'm leaving. Her confidence faltered. You're being ridiculous. Where would you even go? That's no longer your concern, I replied, moving past her toward the door. James. Won't stand for this, she called after me. You know he'll side with me. I turned back one last time. I know. He always does. As I walked out that door, I left behind the document that would have nullified their claim to my inheritance. The paper that my lawyer had prepared months ago when I first sensed Ashley's plans. What Ashley didn't know was that Frank had been smarter than any of us realized. The house they thought was paid off still had a mortgage, one that would come due without my pension to cover it. I stepped into the sunshine, my heart lighter than it had been in years. Sometimes freedom comes in the strangest packages. In my case, it came in the form of my daughter-in-law's ultimatum. Either give us your pension or go to a home today. I chose to leave, and I never looked back. I didn't realize how much pain I'd been living with until it was gone. Sitting in Meredith's guest bedroom that first night, I felt like I could finally take a full breath after years of suffocating. My best friend of 40 years didn't ask questions when I called her that. Morning. She simply said, I'll make up the spare room, and that was that. You know you can stay as long as you need, Meredith said, setting a cup of tea beside me. Her home smelled of cinnamon and old books, comforting smells, safe smells. It won't be long, I promised. I've been preparing for this, Meredith sat on the edge of the bed. How long have you known? That Ashley would eventually try to take everything, since Frank died. I sipped the tea, letting the warmth spread through me. Maybe even before. The signs had been there from the beginning, though I'd tried to dismiss them. When James first brought Ashley home 15 years ago, she'd eyed our modest but well-kept home with a calculating gaze, asking pointed questions about the neighborhood's property values. After the wedding, the comments started, subtle at first, then increasingly bold. This china set must be worth something, she'd say, examining my mother's dishes. Have you had it appraised? When Frank died 6 years ago, Ashley and James insisted I sell my home and move in with them. It's too big for you now, they said. You'll be lonely, they said. What they meant was, your house is valuable, and we want the money. I agreed because I wanted to be near my grandchildren, Emma and Lucas. But from the day I moved in, Ashley began the systematic process of diminishing me. The thing is, I explained to Meredith, she thought I was giving her everything, but Frank was always 3 steps ahead. A small smile crossed my face as I remembered my practical, quiet husband. People underestimated Frank, with his gentle manner and unassuming presence. But my husband had been watching Ashley for years, noticing what I noticed. 2 weeks before his cancer took him, Frank made changes to our will and finances, I explained. He set up a separate account that only I knew about. Every month I've been transferring small amounts into it from my pension. Not enough for Ashley to notice, but enough to build a safety net. Meredith's eyes widened. How much? Enough for a small apartment and about 3 years of modest living, I said. And then there's the insurance policy. The life insurance policy was Frank's masterstroke. Instead of naming James as the beneficiary, as everyone assumed, Frank had created a trust that would only pay out when I turned 70 or if I was forced from my home. My 70th birthday was just 4 months away. Ashley doesn't know about any of this, I continued. She thinks my pension is my only income and that the house I left behind is my only asset. What about James? Meredith asked gently. Is there any hope for him? The question made my heart ache. My son, my only child, had slowly transformed over the years from a kind, thoughtful boy into a man I barely recognized, a man who stood silently by while his wife systematically isolated and belittled his mother. I don't know, I admitted. Ashley has him convinced that I'm becoming forgetful, that I can't manage my own affairs. She's been laying that groundwork for years. It started with small things. Ashley moving my belongings, then insisting I had misplaced them. "Are you sure you put your glasses there, Hillary? You seem confused lately." Then came the whispered conversations with James that would stop when I entered the room, the concerned looks, the increased control over my daily life. "Last month she took my car keys," I said, feeling the anger rise again. "Claimed I had a fender bender at the grocery store. I didn't. She just wanted me completely dependent." Meredith reached out and squeezed my hand. "But you kept records, didn't you? I know you, Hillary Wilson. You wouldn't let this happen without documentation." I smiled and patted the small notebook I kept in my sweater pocket. Every incident, every missing item, every time money disappeared from my wallet. Every doctor's appointment Ashley insisted on attending. Every time she told James I was confused when I was perfectly lucid. The day after Frank's funeral, Ashley had orchestrated a meeting with our family doctor. "We're concerned about Hillary's memory," she had said while I sat there, still raw with grief. The doctor found nothing wrong. But Ashley had planted the seed with James. From then on, every minor forgetfulness became evidence of my supposed decline. "The worst part," I said, my voice breaking slightly, "was what she did with the grandchildren. Telling them not to bother me because Grandma needs rest. Intercepting the Mother's Day cards they made me, claiming I'd lost them. Making me feel like I was too fragile to care for them, when caring for them was all that kept me going after Frank died. I thought of Emma and Lucas, now 10 and 8. Would they understand my sudden absence? Or would Ashley twist that too? "You were the one who raised them while Ashley and James worked," Meredith said indignantly. "You were the one who nursed them through chickenpox and taught them to read." "And that's why I finally left," I said, feeling a sudden certainty. "I couldn't let Emma and Lucas grow up thinking it's acceptable to treat someone that way. I couldn't let them see their grandmother diminished day by day." As I spoke, my phone lit up with a message. It was from James. "Mom, what are you doing? Come home right now. Ashley is worried sick about you." I showed Meredith the message and shook my head. "Ashley isn't worried about me. She's worried about her access to my pension." Meredith looked at me with concern. "What will you do now?" I set the phone down without responding to James. For the first time in years, I felt the stirring of something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Possibility. "Now," I said, "I live." 3 weeks after leaving, I found myself sitting across from my son in a coffee shop downtown. It wasn't my choice. I wasn't ready to see him yet. But when James texted that he wanted to meet alone, without Ashley, something in me couldn't refuse. He looked tired. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually neat hair was slightly disheveled. For a moment, I glimpsed the little boy who used to climb into my lap after scraping his knee, seeking comfort. "You look good, Mom," he said, sounding surprised. I smiled slightly. "Did you expect otherwise?" He fidgeted with his coffee cup. "Ashley said you were struggling, that you were confused, maybe even having some kind of breakdown." "Of course she did." I took a slow sip of my tea before responding. "And what do you think, now that you see me?" James looked away, uncomfortable with the direct question. "I don't know what to think anymore. You just left. No warning, no explanation." "We both know that's not true," I said gently. "The warning, signs were there for years. You chose not to see them." His jaw tightened, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. "Ashley says you've been paranoid, imagining slights. She's only ever tried to help you." I reached into my purse and pulled out a small notebook. "May 3rd last year, Ashley told you I forgot to turn off the stove and nearly burned down the house. The truth? I was making tea when she unplugged the kettle, then called you at work, claiming I'd left the stove on for hours." James stared at me, confusion evident in his eyes. June 15th. Ashley told you I was wandering around confused when you came home from work. The truth, I was looking for my reading glasses, which I later found in Ashley's nightstand drawer. You've been keeping notes? James asked incredulously. I had to. It was the only way to keep track of reality when Ashley was constantly rewriting it. I closed the notebook. This isn't new, James. It's been happening for years. The only difference is that now I've stopped playing along. He ran a hand through his hair, looking lost. I don't know what to believe. Ask yourself this. Since I've been gone, has Ashley been more concerned about my welfare or about my pension? His silence was answer enough. How are Emma and Lucas? I asked, changing the subject. My chest ached at the thought of my grandchildren. James's expression softened. They miss you. Lucas keeps asking when Grandma is coming home. The words cut deep. And what do you tell them? That you needed some time away. He hesitated. Ashley told them you were sick and needed special care. Anger flashed through me. I'm not sick, James. I'm finally well. For the first time in years, I'm making my own decisions. He looked at me skeptically. By moving into some temporary apartment all alone? That's what wellness looks like to you? I hadn't told him where I was staying, but it seemed Ashley had been investigating. It's not temporary. I signed a year lease yesterday. This clearly surprised him. With what money? Your pension barely covers. Your father was smarter than either of us gave him credit for, I interrupted. He saw what was happening long before I did. James fell silent, processing this. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. Was it really that bad, living with us? The question broke my heart a little. Living with my grandchildren was a joy. Living under Ashley's control was slowly killing me. His phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, and I could tell from his expression who it was from. She's checking up on you, I observed. James sighed, putting his phone away without responding. She's worried. You left so suddenly. She's worried about losing control, I corrected gently. James, I didn't come here to drive a wedge between you and Ashley. That's your marriage, your choice. But I won't be manipulated anymore. What do you want then? He asked, sounding tired. I want to see my grandchildren. No supervision, no Ashley hovering and interpreting everything I say as a sign of mental decline. He looked conflicted. I don't know if that's my condition, James. If you want me in your life, in their lives, those are my terms. We sat in silence for a long moment. Through the window, I watched people passing by on the sidewalk, going about their lives, making choices both small and monumental. Finally, James nodded. I'll bring them to the park this Saturday. 2 hours. Thank you, I said, genuinely grateful. As we parted ways outside the coffee shop, James hesitated, then asked, Are you really okay, Mom? For the first time in our conversation, I fully smiled. I'm taking a watercolor class on Tuesdays. I'm having dinner with Meredith and her friends on Thursdays. I'm reading novels until midnight if I want to. Yes, James, I'm really okay. He looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. Walking back to my new apartment, I felt lighter. The conversation with James had gone better than I'd expected. Not perfect, but a start. My new place was small, just a one-bedroom unit in a senior-friendly building downtown. But it was mine. No one moved my things. No one questioned my decisions. No one made me feel less than. When I reached my door, I noticed a folded paper that had been slipped underneath. Opening it, I found a note from my neighbor across the hall, Robert. He was inviting residents to a social gathering in the community room that evening. I hesitated only briefly before deciding to go. This was my new life, one where I said yes to new experiences and connections. That evening, as I chatted with my new neighbors, I found myself sharing parts of my story with Robert, a kind-eyed widower who had moved to the building after his wife's passing 2 years ago. "It takes courage to start over at our age," he said, his voice warm with understanding. "I'm finding that it takes more courage to stay in a situation that diminishes you," I replied. He nodded thoughtfully. "My Margaret used to say that it's never too late to become who you might have been. Your Margaret sounds wise." She was. His smile was tinged with both sadness and fondness. "She also would have liked you very much." For the first time in years, I felt a flutter of something unexpected. Possibility. Not just for friendship, but for whatever might come next in this new chapter of my life. As I walked back to my apartment that night, I realized that in leaving behind the security of what I knew, I had found something far more valuable: freedom. The freedom to discover who Hillary Wilson might still become at 69 years old. The day Ashley discovered my secret began like any other Saturday morning in my new life. I was preparing for my grandchildren's visit, arranging cookies on a plate and making hot chocolate the way Lucas liked it, with extra mini marshmallows floating on top. A sharp knock at my door startled me. James wasn't supposed to bring the children for another hour. When I opened the door, my stomach dropped. Ashley stood there, her perfect makeup unable to hide the fury in her eyes. "Well, isn't this cozy?" she said, pushing past me into my apartment, without waiting for an invitation. Her gaze swept critically around my modest but comfortable living space. "So this is where you've been hiding." I closed the door calmly, though my heart was racing. "I'm not hiding, Ashley. I'm living." She turned to face me, arms crossed. "We found the will, Hillary." So that's what this was about. Frank's original will, the one Ashley believed was still valid, had left everything to James upon my death. What Ashley didn't know was that Frank had created a new trust just before he died. "Good for you," I said evenly. Her eyes narrowed. "Don't play innocent. You've been pretending to be this helpless old woman, making us think you needed our care, when all along you've been planning this." She gestured dismissively around my apartment. "I never pretended to be helpless. You decided I was." Ashley stepped closer, her voice dropping to the cold, controlled tone she used when she was truly angry. "James might fall for your poor, mistreated mother act, but I know what you're doing. You're trying to turn him against me." "If that were my goal, I wouldn't have had to do anything," I replied. "Your actions speak for themselves." Her perfect composure slipped for a moment, something dangerous flashing in her eyes. "You think you're so clever? But that will we found? It says everything goes to James. Everything." I didn't correct her misunderstanding. Let her believe she had the upper hand for now. "Why are you here, Ashley? The children aren't due for another hour." "That's not happening anymore," she said with a satisfied smile. "James and I decided it's not good for the children to be exposed to your instability." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. "That's not what James and I agreed to. James listens to his wife, not his manipulative mother." She glanced at the cookies and hot chocolate. "You should save those for yourself. You'll be eating alone." As she turned to leave, Ashley paused by the small table where I had left some mail, her gaze fixed on an envelope from Meridian Trust Services, the company that managed Frank's secret. Trust. Before I could move, she snatched it up. "What's this? Another secret?" "That's private," I said, keeping my voice steady. Ashley studied the envelope, her expression changing as recognition dawned. "Meridian Trust? Isn't that the company that manages high-value estates?" Her eyes snapped to mine. "What are you hiding, Hillary?" "Nothing that concerns you," I replied, holding out my hand. "Please give that back." Instead, she tore open the envelope, pulling out the quarterly statement inside. I watched her scan the document, her face paling as she took in the figures. $2 million? She whispered, looking up at me in shock. In a trust that Frank set up? I took the statement from her unresisting fingers. Like I said, Frank was smarter than any of us gave him credit for. Ashley's face contorted with rage. You deceived us. All this time, playing the poor widow, living in our home, making us think. Making you think what? I interrupted. That I was a burden? That was your narrative, Ashley, not mine. I never asked for anything except respect. James will contest. This, she hissed. That money belongs to our family. It is with the family, I said calmly. Just not the part of the family you control. Her eyes narrowed. What does that mean? It means Frank set up educational trusts for Emma and Lucas. When they turn 21, they'll each have enough for college and a solid start in life. The shock on her face was almost worth the unpleasantness of this encounter. What about James? What about us? James will receive a portion, yes, but not while I'm alive, and not if I'm determined to have been subject to elder abuse. The color drained from Ashley's face. Elder abuse? You can't be serious. I reached for the notebook. I kept nearby, the one containing years of documented incidents. Every episode you invented. Every time you moved my belongings to make me think I was losing my mind. Every time you intercepted my mail, controlled my medication, or isolated me from friends. It's all here. For once, Ashley seemed at a loss. For words. The perfect facade cracked completely, revealing the calculating woman beneath. You won't win this, she finally said, but her voice lacked conviction. I already have, I replied quietly. Now please leave. I'm expecting my grandchildren. I told you, they're not coming. I smiled, reaching for my phone. Let's see about that. I dialed James's number, putting the call on speaker. He answered on the second ring. Mom? I'm just getting the kids ready to... James, I interrupted gently. Ashley is here. A long silence followed. Then James's voice tight with anger. Put her on. I held the phone out to Ashley, whose confident mask had crumbled entirely. James, she started. Her voice suddenly soft and pleading. I was just checking on Hillary, making sure she was... We talked about this, Ashley, James cut in. You agreed to let me handle this my way. But she's been lying to us. There's a trust. Millions of dollars. I know about the trust, James said quietly. Ashley froze. You know? Mom told me last week. Dad explained everything in a letter he left with his lawyer. I only just received it. The look on Ashley's face was indescribable, a mixture of shock, betrayal, and the dawning realization that her careful manipulations were unraveling. I'm bringing the kids to see their grandmother, James continued firmly. We'll talk when I get home. After Ashley left, storming out without another word, I sat down, my hands shaking slightly as the adrenaline faded. This confrontation had been inevitable, but knowing that didn't make it any easier. An hour later, when Emma and Lucas burst through my door, their small arms wrapping around me in fierce hugs, all the unpleasantness with Ashley melted away. James stood in the doorway, watching us with a complicated expression. Are you going to come back home now, Grandma? Lucas asked, his eyes hopeful. This is my home now, sweetheart, I said gently. But you can visit me anytime you want. As the children explored my apartment, James moved to stand beside me. I should have seen it sooner, he said quietly. We see what we want to see, I replied. Especially when it comes to those we love. His jaw tightened in a way that reminded me of his father. Things will be different now. I didn't ask what he meant by that. Some journeys I knew he would have to take on his own. That evening, after James and the children had left with promises to return soon, I received a text message from Robert inviting me for coffee the next morning. As I typed my acceptance, I realized something profound. In trying to take everything from me, Ashley had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all, the chance to rediscover myself. At 69 years old, my life wasn't ending. It was finally beginning. 3 months passed in relative calm. My life settled into new rhythms. Watercolor classes on Tuesdays, book club on Thursdays, coffee with Robert most mornings in the community room. James brought Emma and Lucas to visit every weekend, sometimes staying for dinner himself. We never spoke about Ashley during these visits, but her absence spoke volumes. Then the invitation arrived. "A reconciliation dinner?" I repeated, staring at the cream-colored card in my hand. The elegant script, unmistakably Ashley's, requested my presence at their home the following Saturday evening. James shifted uncomfortably on my sofa. It was Ashley's idea. She says she wants to make amends. I raised an eyebrow. After 3 months of silence? She's been reflecting, James said, not quite meeting my eyes. Things have been different at home since. Well, since everything came out. I set the invitation down on my coffee table. Different how? James sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so like his father it made my heart ache. We've been in counseling. Ashley's been seeing someone individually too. The therapist suggested this dinner as a first step toward healing the family. I studied my son carefully. The dark circles under his eyes had faded in recent months, but there was still a wariness in his gaze that hadn't been there before Ashley entered our lives. "And what do you want, James?" I asked gently. He looked surprised by the question, as if no one had bothered to ask what he wanted in a very long time. "I want my family back," he said finally. "Not like it was before. That wasn't working for anyone. But something better, something healthier." I picked up the invitation again, considering. I'll think about it. Later that evening, I called Meredith for advice. "It's a trap," she declared immediately. "That woman doesn't change her spots. She's planning something." "Maybe," I conceded. "But what if she's genuinely trying? Don't I owe it to James to at least try?" Meredith scoffed. "You don't owe anyone anything, especially not after what they put you through." "But," her voice softened, "if you're asking if you should go, I think you already know your answer." She was right. Despite everything, I wanted to believe in the possibility of reconciliation, not for Ashley's sake, but for my grandchildren, for James, for the family we could still be. The next morning over coffee, I told Robert about the invitation. "Will you go?" he asked, his kind eyes concerned. "I think I have to," I admitted, not because I expect anything from Ashley, but because I need to show myself that I'm not afraid anymore. Robert reached across the table and covered my hand with his. The gesture was simple, but the warmth of his touch sent a flutter through me that I hadn't felt in years. "Whatever you decide," he said, "remember that you're not alone anymore." Saturday evening arrived all too quickly. I chose my outfit carefully. A sage green dress that Frank had always loved, pearl earrings, a touch of lipstick. Looking in the mirror, I saw not the diminished woman who had fled that house 3 months ago, but someone stronger, more certain. James picked me up at 6. The drive to the house was mostly silent, both of us wrapped in our own thoughts. As we pulled into the driveway, my heart beat a little faster at the sight of the place I'd once called home. "Ready?" James asked, turning. Off the engine. I nodded, though ready was the last thing I felt. Inside, the house smelled of roasting chicken and fresh flowers. Emma and Lucas rushed to greet me, their enthusiastic hugs temporarily washing away my anxiety. "Grandma, we made dessert," Lucas announced proudly. "Chocolate cake, your favorite," Emma added. "And we didn't let Mom help at all." I supervised. From a distance, Ashley's voice came from the doorway to the dining room. She looked different. less polished somehow, more human. Her usual perfect makeup was subdued, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She stepped forward, hands clasped in front of her. "Thank you for coming." "Hillary," she said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "It means a lot to all of us." I nodded, not quite ready to offer more. "The house looks nice." An awkward silence followed, broken by James ushering us all to the dining room. The table was beautifully set, candles flickering in the center. "Mom, you're at the head of the table," James said, pulling out the chair for me. I glanced at Ashley, expecting resistance, but she merely nodded, taking a seat to my right. Throughout dinner, she was polite, almost deferential, passing dishes, and asking about my new apartment, my watercolor class, my book club. The children chattered happily, filling any potential silences with stories about school and friends. It was all so normal. Too normal. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It wasn't until James took the children upstairs to get ready for bed that Ashley finally broached the subject we'd been dancing around all evening. "I know you don't trust me," she said quietly, refilling my water glass. "You have no reason to." I met her gaze steadily. "No, I don't." She took a deep breath. "What I did, how I treated you, it was unforgivable. I won't insult you by asking for forgiveness." "Then what are you asking for?" Ashley looked down at her hands. "A chance to show that I'm trying to change. Not for you, not even for James. For Emma and Lucas." She looked up, and to my surprise, I saw tears in her eyes. "I don't want them to grow up thinking that's how people treat each other, how a family treats each other." For the first time since I'd known her, Ashley seemed genuinely vulnerable. It was disarming. "What changed?" I asked. "Everything," she said simply. "When James found out what I'd been doing, the manipulation, the lies, he gave me an ultimatum. Get help or get out." I couldn't hide my surprise. "James did that?" She nodded. "He said he'd failed you, and he wasn't going to fail his children the same way." James returned then, the children trailing behind in pajamas to say goodnight. As they hugged me tightly, I felt a surge of love so strong it almost overwhelmed me. "Will you come back to visit again, Grandma?" Emma asked hopefully. Before I could answer, Ashley spoke. "Grandma is welcome here any time," she said. "This is her family too." I searched her face for signs of the old Ashley, the calculating look, in her eye, the tight, insincere smile. But all I saw was exhaustion and what appeared to be genuine regret. After the children were in bed, James drove me home. Outside my apartment building, he turned to me, his expression serious. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, "for everything. For not seeing what was happening, for not protecting you, for choosing the easy path instead of the right one." "Oh, James," I said softly. "You're doing the right thing now. That's what matters." He shook his head. "It's not enough, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it up to you." As I watched him drive away, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not trust. I wasn't naive enough for that. But hope that perhaps somehow our broken family could find a way forward. Inside my apartment, I found a text message from Robert. "Hope the dinner went well. Coffee tomorrow?" I smiled, typing back a simple yes. Whatever happened with Ashley and James, I knew one thing for certain. I would never again surrender my independence or my dignity. That chapter of my life was closed forever. 1 year later, I celebrated my 70th birthday on the small patio of my apartment, surrounded by people who truly cared for me. The morning light filtered through the potted plants I'd nurtured over the past year. Bright geraniums, trailing ivy, and the delicate orchid Robert had given me 3 months ago. "Make a wish, Grandma," Emma called as I prepared to blow out the candles on my cake. I looked around at the faces gathered there, Emma and Lucas, their eyes bright with excitement. James, more relaxed than I'd seen him in years. Meredith, my oldest friend, beaming with pride. And Robert, standing slightly to the side, watching me with a warmth that still made my heart flutter even after months of companionship. Ashley wasn't there. Despite her apparent change of heart at our reconciliation dinner, the road to rebuilding trust had been rocky. There were relapses into old patterns, moments when the mask slipped to reveal glimpses of the manipulative woman beneath. 2 months. After our dinner, James had finally made the decision I never asked him to make. He filed for divorce. I can't keep trying to change someone who only pretends to change when it benefits her, he had told me over coffee one morning. The kids deserve better. I deserve better. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. James now lived in a comfortable townhouse 10 minutes from my apartment. Ashley had moved back to Chicago to be near her sister. The children spent most of their time with James, visiting their mother during school breaks. I closed my eyes and made my wish, not for anything I didn't have, but for the preservation of everything I'd found: peace, dignity, family, and unexpected love. "Speech!" Lucas demanded after I blew out the candles. "Oh, I don't think—" I began. "Yes, definitely a speech," Robert encouraged, his eyes twinkling. "The birthday queen must address her subjects," I laughed, shaking my head at his playfulness. At 73, Robert had the spirit of someone decades younger. Our friendship had blossomed slowly, cautiously, into something neither of us had expected to find at our age. "All right," I conceded, rising from my chair. "I'm not one for grand speeches, but I will say this. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined being here, surrounded by all of you, feeling so content." "Just content?" Robert teased gently. "Happy," I amended, meeting his gaze with a smile. "Genuinely happy." "Because of the cake?" Lucas asked hopefully, eyeing the chocolate frosting. Everyone laughed, and I reached out to ruffle his hair. "The cake helps, but mostly because I finally learned something important. It's never too late to start over." After cake and presents, a watercolor set from the children, a silk scarf from Meredith, and a beautiful wooden jewelry box from James, we moved inside to escape the afternoon heat. As Robert helped me carry dishes to the kitchen, he brushed his fingers against mine. "I have another gift for you," he said quietly. But I wanted to wait until later. Curious, I raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. His smile was both nervous and excited. Very. Later, after everyone else had left, Robert and I sat side by side on my small couch. The jewelry box he handed me was small, wrapped in simple blue paper. "This isn't—" I hesitated, my heart suddenly pounding. "Open it," he encouraged gently. Inside was not a ring, as I had half feared, half hoped, but a delicate silver key. "It's to my cottage on Lake George," Robert explained. "I've decided to move there permanently at the end of the summer." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. We had been seeing each other for nearly 9 months, gradually growing closer. The thought of him moving 3 hours away felt like an unexpected blow. Robert took my hand. "I'm hoping you might consider coming with me," he continued, his voice soft with uncertainty. "Not to share a home. I know you value your independence too much for that. But there's a small guest house on the property. It could be yours to use whenever you want. We could be neighbors. More than neighbors if you want." I stared at him, processing his words. "You're asking me to? What exactly?" He chuckled. "I'm not entirely sure myself. I just know that at our age life is too short for conventional arrangements. I want you in my life, Hillary. How that looks is up to you." It was the perfect gift. The offer of closeness without confinement, of companionship without control. Robert understood what I needed in a way no one else ever had. I'd need to think about it, I said carefully. James and the children are here. Of course, he agreed immediately. It's just an option. No pressure, no timeline. I looked down at the key in my palm, then back at his kind face. I never expected any of this, you know. At my age, I thought. Life was basically settled. Robert smiled. I've found that life has a way of surprising you just when you think you've got it figured out. The next morning, I met James for our regular Sunday coffee. He listened attentively as I told him about Robert's offer. So, what do you think? I asked after explaining everything. James considered for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. I think you should go. His answer surprised me. But what about you and the kids? I'd be 3 hours away. Mom, he said gently, you've spent your entire life thinking about everyone else. It's time you did something just for you. But I'd miss so much. Lake George isn't the moon, he pointed out with a smile. We can visit on weekends. The kids would love the lake, and you'd be back here often, I'm sure. I studied my son's face, seeing in it a maturity that hadn't been there a year ago. When did you get so wise? He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I had a good teacher. It just took me too long to pay attention. 2 weeks later, Robert drove me up to Lake George to see the property. The main cottage was charming, a weathered blue clapboard house overlooking the water. But it was the guest house that captured my heart. A small sunlit space with windows that framed the mountains beyond the lake. Standing on its tiny porch, watching the sunlight dance across the water, I felt a sense of possibility I hadn't experienced since I was young. No pressure, Robert reminded me, standing at a respectful distance. It's just an option. I turned to look at him. This man who had entered my life so unexpectedly and become so dear to me. It's a wonderful option. Over the next few months, I found myself spending more and more time at the lake. At first, just weekends, then a week at a time. By the end of summer, I had made my decision. Moving day arrived on a crisp autumn morning. James and the children helped load my most treasured possessions into Robert's car and James's SUV. Are you excited, Grandma? Emma asked as she carefully carried a potted orchid to the car. Yes, I admitted, and a little nervous. Because of your boyfriend, she teased, her preteen sensibilities delighted by the concept of grandmother romance. Laughed, because change is always a little scary, even when it's good change. As we prepared to leave, James pulled me aside. I found this when I was cleaning out some old boxes, he said, handing me a faded photograph. It was a picture of Frank and me on our honeymoon, standing on a dock very similar to the one at Robert's, now our lake house. We were young, laughing, full of dreams about the life ahead. Dad would be happy for you, James said softly. He'd want this for you. Tears pricked my eyes as I tucked the photo into my purse. Thank you for saying that. The drive to Lake George was filled with the children's chatter and laughter. As we crested the final hill and the lake came into view, sparkling in the afternoon sun, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Robert was waiting on the dock, waving as our small caravan pulled up. The children tumbled out of the car, racing, down to the water's edge. James followed more slowly, carrying boxes. Welcome home, Robert said quietly when I reached him. I looked around at the beauty of the lake, at my grandchildren's excited faces, at my son arranging my books on the guesthouse shelves, at this kind man who had offered me a new beginning. Home, I repeated, tasting the word like something precious. Yes, I think it is. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, James and the children staying in the main cottage for the weekend, I sat alone on my porch, wrapped in a blanket against the autumn chill. The stars reflected on the still surface of the lake, creating the illusion of infinite space above and below. My thoughts drifted to the strange journey that had brought me here. Ashley's ultimatum a year ago, either give us your pension or go to a home today, had been meant to trap me, to strip me of the last of my independence. Instead, it had become the key that unlocked the door to a life more rich and full than I could have imagined. I smiled into the darkness. Sometimes freedom comes in the most unexpected packages. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of a better one. And sometimes the last smile belongs to you. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below, and meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. Until here.